Alright, hello everyone. I'm gonna die already. So, I thought I'd do something a little bit cool. It's not really cool, it's just a fucking tyre, but anyway. I thought that while I'm doing this, at least I could show you guys how an aircraft wheel is put together, or especially on a light aircraft. And this is pretty much the same wheel, it's on any 172 or it's actually off the RV. But I thought, hey, look, we'll make a little video of it so you can have a look at it. You can see how we clean up the bearings and stuff like that, how the wheel halves come together, and just something a little bit fun. I'll put it up as like an in-flight entertainment in the stream or something like that. Talk a little bit about the only there's a few little issues that you just want to be aware of if you are ever working on stuff like this. And this is often experimental aircraft, so you can, if you're at home and you're on your own aircraft, you can basically do exactly what I'm doing right now. There's really not much to these wheels. They're basically, this is a tubed wheel. Some of the wheels aren't actually tubed, but held together with 3 bolts, and the wheel, the actual hub of the wheel, is held together by 3 parts. The first part is the brake disc, which is this little part right here, and then the other part is there's a hub on this side and there's a hub on this side. And within the 2 hubs there's some bearings that are captured, and they're just standard like Timken bearings. So we'll go through getting it all disassembled, put it all back together. I'll probably cut the crap around, just like cleaning stuff, like no one wants to see me getting all greasy and shit like that. So yeah, we'll just get started. I'll work through it, I'll talk away, and I don't really know if I'll talk away, I don't know if I can know. And the hangar's open, so anyone could come along and try and say hello. So first thing we do is let all the air out. It's pretty simple, right? Actually, yeah, before I do that, you think it's pretty simple, but the amount of people that get themselves hurt when pulling apart these wheels is phenomenal. If you start undoing these bolts without letting the air out, well, all the pressure that's inside this tyre pops the hub and will smash you in the face with it, especially if you're leaning over it like this. Let the air out before you undo anything. Just let the air out, it's fine. And then we'll come back and undo everything. The proper way of doing it is actually to remove the valve core completely, but I don't have all the tools that I need to do that here, so it's kind of just a bodgy job, just making up what I can, just doing what I can with what I have. And I'll show you why we're replacing. I don't know if this is the left wheel, yeah. If you listen carefully, you'll actually hear the tyre pulling itself away from the bead. There's a lot of pressure. It doesn't look like there's a lot of pressure on this hub. The hub is actually, it's quite a critical component, so it's important to inspect for cracks and stuff like that, because they can crack and fall apart. Try and let as much air out as I can. Regularly you'd pull the valve core out, but I can't do that right now. Okay, so why are we replacing this tyre? Well, the owner of the aircraft just neglected to rotate the tyre. So typically on an aircraft, as the wheels are weighted in a certain direction, you can imagine when there's weight on the aircraft, the undercarriage kind of sags, right? And when it sags, it's a lot more weight on one side of the tyre than the other. So you should be able to see here that this side is completely gone. There's no tread where there's tread on this side. So typically what you do with an aircraft like that is you'll rotate the tyres, which can be as simple as literally just pulling one wheel off and putting it on the other side. And what that will do is it will change the contact patch of where the rubber is. Can you do that in this aircraft? It's outboard. No, you can't. You actually need to disassemble a tyre and rotate the rubber. Some aircraft you can, but no, you can't. I don't know. Whatever. Fuck, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing here. So yeah, he didn't rotate it. So this tyre would actually, if he didn't rotate it, probably would have had another 50 hours, at least another 50 hours. But because he didn't rotate it, one side is completely gone, and in fact there's actually some canvas showing. It's hard to see. Oh, I hope you guys can see it, I don't know. There's some canvas showing here. So if that canvas wasn't there, oh, there. If this canvas wasn't showing here, I'd say, yeah, your tyre's sweet, but it's not, it's fucked. Yeah, in fact, it probably should have been put in the bin about 20 hours ago, but he used it, flew around the state, so yeah. Anyway, if you rotated the tyre, this tyre would still be good, but now it's just good for the trash heap, so yeah. Anyway, the next thing is we've got to break the bead, because the rubber ring that's on the hub there is still quite strong. So because of that, we just use, there's proper bead breakers, a big long bar that you can pop it, or you just use the tried and tested jump on the wheel technique. With a small aircraft like this, you can do larger tyres which have more than 30 psi in them, you just have no chance of doing this. So I'm actually going to have to stand on it, be a fatty, and bleed some more air out of it. And not fall over, apparently. Oh, I'm spinning. Hashtag disco. Fuck the rim. This is the brake disc. Okay. So try and be as much of a fatty as we can. And just break the bead off, which I think we've done. It looks like it's broken off, but if it's not, we'll figure that out in a second. The next thing I'll do is I'll just pull the wheel bearings out, and they're quite easy. Get myself a rag here and we'll clean it up. This is all the brake dust and crap that gets accumulated on them. There's just a little retainer that's just in here, and we'll just pop this puppy out. Just a single little crappy circlip. And then we have a dust seal. Yep, we just pull everything out. We have a spacer that's... this is just a grease holder. Another dust seal. And this is a spacer that just sits on top of the bearing like that. And this is a standard bearing. Sits in a cup like that. And the race is in there. And I'll do the same for the other side. It's also important to remember which bearing comes from which side. Because these bearings, they end up wearing into a certain groove pattern, and if you swap the bearings, it'll regrind or re-find its own center point within the actual race, and yeah, just unnecessary wearing on the actual race. And again, just another circlip. So I've just got them separated here, so I know which one's the outboard side, which one's the inboard side. And I'll just show you guys, we'll pop all this stuff out. You can see it hopefully a little bit better. Again, just the dust seal. This is the grease seal. It's felt, it's like a felt thing, so it actually can absorb grease if it needs to. And no spacer on this side, that's okay. So I completely missed that. Nope, no spacer. I'm not convinced this bead is broken here. That's interesting, the actual, you probably can't see it. The actual tube has been pinched by the wheel on this. I'm surprised it hasn't actually gone down. That's interesting. Alright, let's get the thing undone here. It's literally just three bolts. 3 bolts, then they're nylock nuts, so they're the safetying is built into the actual bolt. Oops. If I had the lifty loosey righty tighty. Okay, nut on the washer on this side. And they're not done up too tight, these bolts, like they're firm, because you obviously don't want the hub moving around, but they're not actually done up too tight. I say that, but... That should be enough so I can get these off with just my fingers now. On larger aircraft tyres, these bolts are incredibly critical. In fact, they're usually specialist bolts that have to get sent away and what's called NDT'd, or non-destructive tested, and checked for cracks, because larger aircraft tyres, like on 777s and 737s, they hold hundreds of pounds of pressure in them. And yeah, it's There was hundreds of pounds of pressure on these bolts. These are the only thing that are holding the two wheel halves together, which we'll see in a second when we pull the thing apart. But let's keep everything together here. Let's get everything undone. These bolts are just standard AN style bolts, so there's nothing really special about them. There's like close tolerance bolts, stainless steel bolts. These are just regular old bolts. It's just the pressure in this tyre isn't as great as in the larger aircraft. Alright, so now off comes the brake disc. There you go. So that's just the brake disc. It sits into the hub there. It's not very well worn, so it's going to go straight back onto the aircraft. We'll give it a bit of a clean and have a look at it in a second, but I'll try and get the rest of this apart now, if we can. She's still pretty well stuck together, so go back into a jumping technique. Something happened. It's a bad idea to use this like I'm doing here, but oh fuck, like I was just saying. The bead is just not breaking, so I'm just going to put a bolt in just so the hubs don't warp against each other, and try and let a little bit more air out. The other wheel came apart a lot easier. I think it's actually because the tube's being pinched on this side. I think that's probably why it's getting a little bit hard to undo. The tube's holding a shitload of pressure in it. Let's try it again. Do not know. Oh, there we go. Did it. That's why having the big lever thing makes a shitload more sense. And you don't fall over and hurt yourself if you fall off the tyre, so I mean there's that as well. Alright, now comes the bolt. And the valve core is held in by a rubber grommet. You just kind of attempt to pull the fucking thing out. It'll eventually come. There we go. So here's the first hub, first part. We see the 3 bolts. This is the face that attaches between the two halves. And if you're looking for cracks, this is typically where you'll see them. You're gonna have to have a good look here. There's a little bit of something happening there. So we'll check that out a little bit closer in a second. And you can see tube on the inside, other part of the wheel on the inside there, the other half of the hub, and yeah. Sorry, I just got to do the super duper engineering inspection type stuff on it, but I'll just make that shit up as we go. It's still not broken off this piece here. Sometimes the beads can get really, really stuck, like what it's doing now. All else fails, just get a bigger hammer, which is what we might have to do. Yeah. Well, I'm just going to pause the video here and just fuck around with this for a little while. Alright. After much swearing and jumping, we got it. Don't want to put you guys through the swearing. You hear enough of it anyway, right? Now, it didn't fall over, so that's a good start. Well, it would have been funny, but I didn't have the camera on, so it wouldn't have fucking mattered. Still hear me swearing anyway. There we go. 2 halves, out they come. Make sure I didn't fuck the wheel. So that's what the hubs look like when they're put together. They just pull apart like this. The critical part of the wheel hubs is actually in this radius here. This is where the most load is, or that radius there. This is where the most load of the tyres actually is. So when you actually look at the tyre, that's also where the tyre is the strongest around this bead section here. It's where it puts the most amount of pressure onto the actual wheel. It's really important to have a good look at those parts there. So to do that, we'll just do a little bit of a clean up. I don't have much stuff here to clean it up properly, but just clean off as much as we can, have a good long look in there. Clear off all the old grease. You can see all the old grease inside here. It's not a clean job. It's only it's one of the jobs I really don't like doing, because you just get grease and talcum powder and shit all over you. It's not very glamorous. But hey, it's aeroplane stuff, so I really don't care. Let's give everything a good old clean. Could use cleaning products and stuff like that as well. Like, there's plenty of degreasers, brake cleaners and stuff like that. But when I start touching the bearings, I'll actually put gloves. I will put gloves on, but I'll just have a clean. Check this. I'm just checking this area, this radius on the inside there, for any cracks or deformation or anything like that. Anything that might look like it shouldn't be there. And the second important critical area is this facing here. That facing there, because as you can imagine, if the 2 wheel hubs were put on and there was like a little bit of a cant to them, and the wheel isn't centered, it'll bust a bolt. So you have to have a real good long look at them. And again, in the larger aircraft wheels, what you'll actually do is you'll test these areas around the bolts. Like I said, there's a lot of force on these bolts, right? But the larger aircraft, when there's hundreds of PSI in the wheels, is they'll actually get a thing called an eddy current tester. And it's just a little probe that looks like this, and you just run it over the edges of the metal, and it picks up by sound. Well, you listen for sound, and it tells you if there's any cracks around any of these bolt holes. So you typically don't see paint in this area, but someone's decided it was a good idea to paint it, so whatever. But yeah, you'll use that. What it does is it passes a current through the metal, and so if there's no discontinuity, well, you don't hear anything. As soon as there's a discontinuity, you'll hear a beeping sound. There's a little bit that looks a little bit "How's your father?" in here, but yeah, that's actually not cool. I'm gonna have to have a good look at that. There's a stress fracture, or a stressed area. I don't know if you guys will see it. There's a stressed area just near my finger there in the corner. I point with the bolt. Just in that area in there, in this sort of radius around. I'll try and show you a little bit better. You might see it's just in there. I'll take a photo of it or something. Anyway, I'm going to have to clean all that off and have a good look at it. That's not cool. Okay, so we got one clean. We'll go ahead and clean this other one up here. This is the brake side one, so it's a lot more dirtier. It's got a lot more brake dust. So it's a good cue to get some gloves. You don't want to get this. You don't want to get this brake dust stuffed on you. You don't want to put it in your mouth. You don't want to do anything like that because it will just kill you. It's not good. You don't want to breathe it in either, as I say while I'm breathing. But you get the idea. Just stay away from it. Don't rub your face after you've been playing with it. Cleaning Simulator 2016, right? Small shop rags. Get everything all nice and cleaned up. The old grease. The other thing you do when you're cleaning these is you inspect the race. So we have a good long look inside this bearing cone, this cup inside, and we look for any hammering, like if this bearing was sitting in there and chattering away, it'll start wearing away at the nitrate coating in there. So we have a good look in there, see if there's anything. There's a few little marks there, but just kind of standard scoring. I don't know if you guys will see it, but there's just some standard scoring in there. Nothing to be too scared about. Again, the utilization of these aircraft, it's not a commercial aircraft, it's experimental, so there's no legal risk, there's no real risk with a bearing like that. There's just no issues. Plus they're an absolute bitch to get in and out. You know, the way you get these in and out, they're press fit. So actually you have to get a blowtorch, heat up the outside of the ring here. So you heat up this, because this is more dense material than the hub. As the hub expands, and then you actually bash the bearing out with a wooden block from this way. To get it back in is even harder. Is you actually need to take this bearing, go put it in a freezer, so it cools down and shrinks a little. Then you still blowtorch this thing up, and then you bash it in. It was really, really annoying actually getting them in and out, but whatever. We'll have a good look at this hub as well, and look at the inner radius here, and there's no issues there. There's nothing around the bolts here either, so I'm going to pause the video again. I'm going to go clean this other hub off and have a good look at it and see if there's a crack forming there. If there is, you can probably, I wouldn't re-weld it, but these wheel hubs, they're pretty expensive, so I don't want to tell the owner that. I'd rather come up with a solution rather than tell him he has to fork out for $1,000 pair of wheel hubs. So we'll go check it out, have a look at it, and come back, we'll reconvene. Alright, so I cleaned it up a little bit. There is a little something happening in there. If we just have a look, I don't think it's stress related, but if it is, we're going to deal with it now. It's right in the corner there. It's only a tiny, tiny little piece. It's a tiny piece, but just a tiny little crack or starting of a crack. It hasn't started to extend yet. So I can kind of, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of, it's got a little file here, and I'm just going to use this little file just to clean up the little bit there, because what that forms is a stress razor, and that stress there will, as the wheel gets more and more stress, it'll start opening and the crack will continue. If I smooth out that corner there, I'll just smooth it out just a tiny, tiny little bit. What it'll do is it will actually redistribute the load on the wheel back to around the crack, rather than the crack being the weak point. The force will go to the path of least resistance, so we'll go ahead and just clean this up just a little bit, not much, just to make it Actually, as to take material away, you can see there's a little bit of a crack in there, but just be nice and gentle and not take too much material away. All we want to do is just stop the stress razor there. And we've gotten it. So you'll see what I've done. Hopefully, I don't know if the camera's picking up the stuff as I do it here, so you just have to take my word for it. So you do this with props as well. You'll take a little file, if you had a little nick in your prop, your propeller obviously at the front of the aircraft, is to stop the crack spreading. You just take a little file like this and just go smooth the corners off and just make it nice and smooth, and that just, like I said, will just redistribute the load around the crack a little bit nicer. Clean it up with a little bit of emery paper here, whatever you fucking call it, Scotch Brite. Good as new. You probably won't see it, but it's in that corner there. I've just taken a little bit of material off it. You hopefully you'll be able to see it. Just a tiny little bit of material, nothing too much. Tiny little bit, just to get rid of that stress razor there. And what I'll do is I'll mark it with a pen, and so when I pull this wheel off again next time, I know to look here. So when we look here, we'll have a check it out. We'll have the wheel off again in about 50 hours of flight time, so it's not like it's going to be running away and we'll never see the aircraft again. So fixed. You're better off catching it when it's a small little thing like that, rather than letting it get larger and larger and larger. So old tyre, aircraft tyres, hold on to them. They're fantastic for doing all sorts of things, like setting props on them and stuff like that. You never throw old aircraft tyres away. Well, we got some new. We got a new tubey tube. New tubey tube, a donut, Michelin, of course. Well, it's not of course. Michelin, they make a lot of aircraft tyres. So, a whole heap of other crap that comes along with it. Who cares? Is the new rubber. It looks all beautiful and round, and you'll see it's actually got a completely different profile. I'm going to have to ask the owner about that. I mean, you see the profile, this is a round tyre, it's completely flat. It's going to be even more important to rotate these tyres, because these round tyres, right, where they sit on the ground is, they'll sit on a bit of an angle like that, but this flat tyre is basically designed for 172, so when you put them on their side like this, you're going to wear this inside bit a little bit. There is a bit of a camber there, but nowhere near like a camber like that. Like, yeah, interesting. Oh well, I didn't buy the shit. Someone else's decision, not mine. This guy that puts shit together. We'll clean this brake rotor off now. We'll have a look at it. Again, the brake rotor is another prime place for cracking. Imagine if you use lots and lots of brakes. It gets really, really hot, and then you don't use brakes again because you get in the air or you land and you shut the aircraft up. So the brakes here run through a lot of heat cycles, so we go from really hot, doing next to nothing. So another good candidate to have a really good look at for cracks and stuff like that. So clean out as much of this crappy brake dust as we can. Not breathe it in, of course. Yes, PPE protection and all that crap. Just be chilled out when you're cleaning it. Plus the brake dust that's in this is far too heavy to be airborne. There's a little bit of crap still in there, but first application of brakes when you send this aircraft out is going to be covered in brake dust again anyway. So again, the important spots is in this radius down in here, to have a good look there. Now I've seen these things be completely snapped there, and people are still flying around the aircraft wondering why their brakes don't work, and this disc is just completely separated from the hub. They're like, oh, I don't know why my brakes aren't working, I don't know, like, oh. You know, did you actually look at your fucking wheels? Because this isn't attached to anything. But, yeah. The other place they'll actually crack is if you get like a little rock caught in between the brake pad and here is they'll crack in a radial around there, so you have like a ring that spins and the inner bit. I don't know. People are oblivious. Just absolutely oblivious. I don't know if that's how their voice actually was. That's how I imagine people that are like, oh, I don't know, like, could just fucking fly my airplane. That's how I imagine people sound. That's how everyone sounds in my head. Like, yeah. But yeah, you need this thing to be attached to something to actually slow your aircraft down. I've just got to keep an eye on the battery here, so I'll have to go and charge it up again in the meantime. Okay, next thing is I'll just clean up all these old bearings and stuff like that. Just give them a new lease of life. All of the crap off them. Make them look pretty. Some people won't bother to clean these, but I don't know, in my opinion. One, if you don't clean things, you never get to inspect them, so you never know if they're okay. And two, like things like this is a spacer that sits on the bearing here. So this sits in the hub and this spacer sits here for where the wheel bolt goes. So this doesn't actually carry any load, it's just a spacer. However, what you don't want is this spacer to be spinning on the bearing like this. This all needs to be one unit with just the bearing spinning. What I want is this part there. I just want the bearing spinning like this. I don't actually want to see this spinning like that. So it's a good idea to have a good look at this, and actually I just covered it with grease again. And have a good look at this and just look for any score marks. There are a few, but these just look like installation marks there. You would know when you see one of these spun, it's just they're torn apart because the wheels are hitting the ground at 100 kilometers an hour, and this is just soft material here, like aluminum. So aluminium for the rest of the world. If you're American, aluminum. Clean everything off. Whole heap of freaking grease and disgusting crap on this. I won't put you through me watching clean the second bearing. I'll just go ahead and probably charge the camera up a little bit and reconvene when everything is nice and clean. This is the felt spacer. And this just absorbs any extra grease and stuff like that, so it doesn't just spray out everywhere. Probably don't even want to watch this, right? Just rush cleaning metal things. How exciting. This is what the bearings look like when they come out. Just old and crappy grease. Old and crappy grease. And I'll show you how we re-grease them. Well, I've got a dodgy way of re-greasing. Well, it's not dodgy, it's just a bit of a kludge to get it re-greased. There's special bearing packers and stuff like that. They cost money. You just take a little bit of time and do it another way. Anyone that's owned an old motorcycle or even a trailer or anything like that know what I'm talking about. You just grab a handy dandy little Ziploc bag and fill that with grease and just pack it manually. It just takes a few extra minutes. The automatic greases they're great. They make sure that you get an even amount of grease through the actual bearing, but again in low weight situations like this, like a general aviation aircraft, you can get away with what you've got. Again, another important inspection on the bearings is to see if the bearing is spinning on the axle, which is this inner bearing there. Then also roll this top bearing across and look at all of the individual balls here. You want to see if there's any, in AC 4313, that's the technical manual for inspections, the technical standards of inspections. It's on the FAA website if you ever want to have a read of some ultra boring shit. Grab that book. It's like 600 pages of just nonsense, like this is a bolt, this is an AN head. An AN head has a cross on it and some manufacturers put their stamp on it. Like, fuck, okay, it's a bolt, dude, I get it. But yeah, have a read if you want to be incredibly bored. It's fantastic toilet reading. But yeah, AC43, it gives you standards for what you're looking for in the bearings. There's different types of hammering and stuff like that. I don't know, there's all sorts of fancy names, but if you look at it and it looks broken, it's probably broken, just go buy another bearing. Like, but yeah, they tell you the different types of, how interesting, they tell you all the different types of acceptable wear and they give you a, by they I mean AC43, gives you a standard as what's acceptable wear, what is unacceptable wear, and stuff like that. But again, in most applications, if you look at it and it looks broken, go get a new one. That's pretty much the, if you're in a commercial situation, like a commercial aircraft operator, that's typically what it is if it looks broken, just fix it. But at the same time, when things are a little bit, I don't know, well, then you just go look at the standard, or the aircraft maintenance manual, and that'll tell you what's acceptable, what's unacceptable. They give you like, well, if it's 1/16 of an inch, again the voice, it's 1/16 of an inch on 3 individual rollers versus all 13, then the bearing is not applicable, it's not good for service, it's as unserviceable. Like fuck, I don't care, like if it looks broken, throw it away. Yeah. Anyway, rants with Rush, I'm going to charge the battery. We'll be back after I've cleaned that up, and we'll talk about reassembly. We'll do that. Alright, we're back. I'm back, got some juice into the GoPro here, and did a few other things on the aircraft. I pulled some intake pipes off it. So we'll have that engine gremlin. If it's not going to be the intakes, it's going to be a valve, like a stuck valve somewhere. But if the intake's out, at least I'll be able to inspect it and do all the other things I need to do. So. Anyway, let's get this thing back together. Yeah, I'm just trying to decide whether, yeah, we'll get it back together. I'll show you guys the greasing side of things. It's probably boring, but hey, you get to see me get dirty, right? So, hey, I'll be right back. Alright, so this is the simple way of, the dirty way of greasing bearings, is we have ourselves some aeroshell grease number 5, just like Mumbo number 5, except it's grease. We just take a regular old Ziploc bag and we jam our finger in there, but it's getting a little bit sharp in there now. And a good spooge full of grease, and this is where it gets dirty. You can't expect to grease anything on an aeroplane with grease and not get dirty. It's one of my pet hates, but whatever. You just have to accept you're going to get grease fucking everywhere, and just don't touch anything. You'll touch your face, you'll touch your hair, and you end up wearing a grease gel for the next week. And then just put the bearing inside there and massage the grease into the bearing. Simple as that. But yeah, the fancy pants thing that you can get is it crushes, it puts a whole heap of force down and pushes the grease directly through the bearing. This way is not quite as efficient. You kind of really have to put in the effort to squeeze that grease all the way in. Losing a little bit out the top there. Yeah, most of this grease is in there now. You can see most of the grease that I started with is all being massaged into the bearing. We keep it in the case so we don't get it all dirty in the meantime. And we do the same thing again. The other one, you could pull it out now, but we'll just keep it in there so it's nice and clean and I don't get more grease freaking everywhere. Spooge in some more of this greasy grease. And yeah, with aviation, there's all different greases. Again, you can look up AC4313. And they'll tell you what all of these greases are for. Grease 5 is typically for wheel bearings and stuff like that. Grease 7 is a red grease. It's usually used in prop hubs, and there's some other arbitrary stuff. All it is just different temperature ratings and stuff like that. Different temperature ratings and load ratings as well, so the grease is actually rated to a specific load that it can handle. Move that over there and massage this grease in. Again, not the most exciting stuff in the world, right? But whatever. If you don't like it, you go somewhere else, right? Oops, we just made a little hole there. A super duper bag, not as super duper as expected. So now we're definitely going to have grease everywhere. Now I'm not going to put the bearings in straight away here. We're going to start reassembling the wheel, and okay, we're looking good there. All new grease is massaged in, that's perfect. Now we'll start reassembling the wheel. I'm going to have to go get some more gloves later. Don't worry about that later, we'll worry about that. We'll have a little pile of trash over there so we don't get anything mixed up. So we'll start with our new rubber. And it's important to note there is a direction with these tyres, even though that the tread doesn't actually give you a direction. There is an inner and an outer side, but well, there is, but there isn't. I can like mirror the tyre and it's fine. But this little red dot here is your indexing dot for where the valve stem should be. So at manufacture they figure out that this is the slightly lighter part of the wheel, and so this is where you should have the valve stem, so it'll just keep the wheel all nice and balanced. And technically after I've done this I should balance the wheel and all this other stuff. You put the wheel up and you can balance it all nice and super duper properly, but again in our cases it's with a light aircraft like this it's not going to be applicable. Heavy aircraft though, yeah, you'd balance the wheels because of the speeds that they're operating at. There can be quite a significant vibration. Light aircraft, you're on the brakes as soon as you're in the air, so you touch the brakes when you get in the air. So yeah, start with the rubber. So we start with the rubber, and we go ahead and get ourselves some tyre talc, talcum powder for tyres, whatever. Just put a whole heap in there, and what that's designed to do is to make sure that the new tube that we put in, it doesn't actually bind to any part of the rubber on the inside. So just put a whole heap in, spin the wheel, bounce it so it attaches to everything, breathe in as much of the talcum powder as possible, just to maximise the lung cancer possibilities. There'll be a little bit left in there. If there is, you can tip it out. I kind of just hold on to it because I'm going to need it a little later. Try and get some on my hands and actually physically rub it. Make sure it's all massaged in, especially around the bead, because you want the beads to settle in nicely. So again, another messy job. Move that out of the way so you can see. There's probably a little bit too much in there, but we'll just keep rotating the tyre. Looking good. A little bit extra there, we'll try and get it out, but once it's in, it's just about impossible to get out. So. Plus, it's just talcum powder. Just dust it out over there, perfect. I'm not too worried about it getting all over the wheel, I'm going to tidy it up in a second. Now grab myself my new tube. I'm going to do the same thing, to just put it in my hand here, hands, and just kind of, you don't have to do this, it's just nice to get it in properly. What you don't want is the tube to pinch as it inflates, or like double over on itself. So having a good amount of talc on it will make the rubber just sit in there nicely. Think of it as dry lubricant, if you like. No pun intended, of course. Speaking about rubbers and lubricants. Okay, so everything is all nice and clean there. Now look for a red dot that's completely covered in talcum powder. Make sure the valve is pointing up in the right way, and now we try and stuff the thing in there. And this is usually when you everything will get pinched up and moved around, but This is why we added so much talcum powder to make everything. I'll try and show you guys so you can actually see it rather than just seeing me looking at shit. Alright, so the tube is in, but you can see it doesn't look too great, eh? It's not seated in nicely. So some people do it differently, I don't know, we'll just do it how I do. So I got the tube in there. I make sure it's seated in sort of a fairly decent space, move it around, make sure the valve is, again, lined up here with this red little dot. And then I'll just put a little bit of air in the tube. So I'll just inflate it a little bit, not to inflate the actual rubber, but just to I don't know, am I recording? Okay, whatever, I hope I am. It says preview not supported, but it's not telling me if we're recording. If not, I'm standing at home talking to myself. Yeah, so we'll just put in a little bit of air, and while we're putting in some air, I'll just quickly check the camera. As we can see, I'm now dirty as fuck. So I'll just put in a little bit of air, just so I can move the tube around. So I'll come over here. This is the little air compressor we got here. Yes, and also aircraft tyres are meant to have nitrogen, but we don't have a nitrogen bottle here, so there's no real issue. That's all the air we need in it. I don't need much. I don't want it to actually inflate. But let me just check that we're actually recording, and I'm just being a fucking loser and talking to myself. No, we're recording. No, I think I just turned it off. I don't know. Still got a red light. Best production in history. So there's a little bit of air in the tube now, so you can see it's actually filled out the tyre, but I can still wobble it around a fair bit. And that's really good because now I can ensure when I put this in I'm not going to pinch the tube. So I can also rotate the tube around fairly easily with all that talcum powder. Look at that. Look at that. So yep, we'll make sure everything is nice and lined up, and I'll rub my hand through the inside of the wheel, make sure there's no pinching or anything like that. It's really annoying if you do this around the wrong way and you find a pinch. You have to pull the wheel all apart again and go buy a new tube. Alright, we'll spin it. Everything nice and lined up. Beautiful. Now I need to find the right hub. One of these hubs has a hole. There we go. That's the hub that's got the hole for the valve stem. Now we've got to try and get the valve stem in there. Yep, we'll just add some lubricant, which is going to be my spit. I just don't want to spit on camera and be that vulgar Australian. Add a little bit of lubricant there, and then we'll just try and pop this thing through the rubber grommet. Bring this back over here so you can see it. It's going to be a little bit on the tough side, but it started to go in there, so. This is one of those times where you just need that third pair of hands. One extra hand would be really helpful. I'm going to probably pause the camera while I struggle with trying to get this in. I'll be back in a second. Alright, I think we're recording again. I got my hands all over the camera, which is just going to be annoying. We persuaded it in, so we've got the valve stem in here through the little grommet. And see, we're a little bit off center from where we should be. This should be directly lining up. So go ahead and spin the hub just a little bit. We don't just want to spin the hub though, we want to make sure that the tube on the back end, when we look in here, we want to make sure the tube lines up, because it could be like that, it could be like that. Hopefully we can see that. I don't know if we can. Yeah, we'll make sure the tube is right smack bang in the middle of the little cutout there in the hub. After we've done that, we'll take our other side, our other hub, And it's got a little cutout here that fits around the valve stem, and make sure that goes in the right place. A little bit off. Just try and line it up as best as possible. And we start taking our bolts, making sure everything lines up. Almost did a noob mistake. So this is the inside part of the wheel. Here is the brake hub. And make sure that puppy's on. You get everything all nice and tight. And you start again. Alright. That's looking pretty good. So again, another point where you need a spare set of hands is just trying to get everything sort of clamped down here. A little cheeky way. So even though there's little to no air actually in the tube, it's just getting the wheel here to cooperate. In this case you can't use a hammer. Ugh. I'm sure there's an easier way of doing this. To watch me struggle away with the stupid fucking wheel. Oh, come on, you piece of crap. I know I've got a big vise there, but I don't like using big heavy tools. Yeah, I can compress everything and put everything together and trying to get this washer on at the same time is proving to be my nemesis. Oh, there we go. We're a winner. Just give me a thread, just a thread or two. Yes. One or two threads, that's all we needed. And I'm missing a socket. I'll be back. Alright, so look, slipped on the talcum powder there. Make sure we do these up the right way or I'll start swearing. Fuck! Are you serious? Aeroplane parts, eh? Well, that's pretty funny. Not for me, however. Fuck you. The radio is like trying to be funny and suggest songs for Donald Trump's campaign and all that crap. Okay, we put it on more threads this time. There should be no more swearing. Theory, no more swearing, so we just got one bolt in there. The rest of the hub should just about line up. Yes, and it does. Drop these other bolts through. Bee's dick. It's off by a bee's dick, so I'll just give it a little bit of a love tap with the official hammer. Especially the official unit of measurement, a bee's penis, as to how far off you are. And of course I should have had like a proper hammer and mallet and all that crap, but whatever. I'm trying to be functional here, not professional. Actually a little bit of both, I guess. You gotta match them up. You've got to be somewhat professional, but still have fun along the way while we're doing it. So, alright, let's go ahead and start torquing up these bolts. Now when you're torquing them up, there's only 3 bolts in this, so it's not that big of a deal. But again, like I've been saying, in these larger wheels, it's important you torque them up in the correct order. By correct order I mean is you need to tighten up the opposite bolt to each bolt you just subsequently tightened. So essentially you just tighten everything up in this nice neat little star pattern. In this case there's only 3 bolts, so it doesn't matter what bolt I actually go to and tighten, each subsequent bolt is going to be opposite. And again, also note the bolts are all what you call nylock bolts, and what that means is that they safety themselves. So after you've tightened them down, the nylon part that's inside the bolt locks against the thread. You're going to get limited use out of nylock nuts. They eventually wear out because they just have no locking mechanism. But essentially you're just jamming nylon into the thread so the bolt doesn't come loose. And go ahead and do our official torquing of the bolts now. And for those of you that are familiar with aviation, you'll be saying, where's your fucking torque wrench? So you know exactly how much pressure you're putting on those bolts. And to USA, I will do it later. And the other way to check the actual tightness is just have a look at the threads and see how many threads are sticking out. You can kind of check that. If one looks a lot smaller than the other, then you've done something wrong. But you don't want to over tighten. You don't want to over tighten the hubs, and I believe it's 160 foot-pounds for these wheels. 140 to 160 foot-pounds is usually thereabouts. We'll do it up to German standard for the time being. If you don't know what German standard is, it's good and tight. You make sure it's the nuts are good and tight, and then you're good to go. Okay, so we can add some more air and we'll set the bead on it now, and then we'll go ahead and put the bearings back in and we'll go jam it onto the aircraft, and we'll be good to go. So I'm going to add a little bit more air. Now when you're actually inflating a tyre for the first time, the proper procedure is to actually have a tyre cage. There's plenty of videos on YouTube you can search for tyres blowing up in their initial inflation. So if you're inflating them, don't look over them like this, because you'll either get killed or knocked out, either or it'll be funny. But yeah, the tyre cages you're meant to put them in inflate on the inside, especially again the larger aircraft tyres like 73s, 777s. Airbuses, stuff like that. They have big full cages to put the tyres in when they inflate them, because if they go, they tear people apart. So this little thing, we should be okay. I say that though while I'm recording things for the internet, which means nothing can go wrong. We'll move everything out of the way and we'll set the bead. We'll hear a whole heap of cracking and stuff like that. You probably won't hear it over the top of the sound of the little compressor here, but we'll give it a go. So another good technique is you'll see that the bead hasn't completely seated against the actual hub there. So you get a little bit of air in it, and then you just bring it over and you play basketball with it and just bounce it on the ground. And what that does is it just adds a little bit of shock factor to the rubber. And that's actually already seated the bead. And again, you don't do this with large aircraft tyres. One, because they're too big, and two, they're worth a lot of money. But light aircraft tyres, you do it like this. You'll see the bead has come in nicely now against the hub, so we can go ahead and add some more air. Just check that the bead is seating all the way nicely around the actual hub. Go ahead and add some more air. So that was to about 15-20 psi. Putting air in a tyre. How exciting. Looking pretty good, so we just put 32 psi inside it. And I don't know, I might cut that. No one wants to just see someone standing over an air compressor, right? Alright, next thing is we will go ahead and reinstall our bearings. So we're going to get all nice and dirty. And we'll open these up. The other reason why you keep them here is keep it all, grab your a finger full of some grease there, and we'll go and slop that inside the bearing race. We've got some nice fresh grease all inside there, all nice and greased up. If I had a Scottish accent, I'll try and quote The Simpsons. Now, there's a little bit too much grease. There's no point having too much in there because it just ends up getting sloshed around and just making everything messy. So we'll try and not have too much in there, but there we go. Got the bearing set in there nicely with a little bit of extra grease, and just roll it around, make sure it's got a good fit in there, and it does. We'll try and make sure we don't touch everything and get everything completely covered. Everything just gets covered in grease when you're touching it. So now we'll just reinstall it the way we unpacked it. Let's go ahead and get our first grease seal here. Go ahead and slot that in here. And that's just the first retainer. Seems to be sitting in there quite right. There we go. That should be a little bit better. Yeah. The bearing a little bit of room there apparently. That will make sense. After we've done that, we'll go ahead and put the felt seal in there. Take another dust cover, cover that up, and get our spacer. That's all now covered in grease. I'll put the spacer in there. You see the spacer fills everything out, so it looks all nice and it's all nice and flush here now. So the bearing and the spacer and everything is now seated in there nice and neatly. And we go and grab our circlip. This is when you get poked in the eye. So it's got one end there, a circlip, I'm sure everyone knows the circlip. You just place one end in. It's easier to put them in than it is to take them out. Still very easy to get one of these caught in your eye. Again, should have some goggles on, but there we go, it drops in with a little bit of a click. take a screwdriver and just try and make sure it's in there okay and it's seated the whole way around. Just because the wheel's covered all in grease doesn't mean it has to look like crap, so we'll take a rag to it, get rid of all of my greasy fingerprints. Look at that, looks like a brand new wheel. It kind of is. It's kind of a brand new wheel. I've kept a little bit of grease on the inside there because that's where the axle of the wheel is going to slide into, so there's no point cleaning it up, and it just helps me install the wheel back on the aircraft, having a little bit of grease there. And if you look in there, you'll see the inside of the bearing. It seals everything up from the inside of the wheel. So we'll do the same thing for the inner side. Again, good fingerful of grease here. Oh yeah. It fucking feels disgusting no matter who you are, it just feels, yeah. No comment. Ugh, it's just like, what the? Oh, whatever. No comments. No disparaging comments. I'm not implying anything at all. It's not that I'm disgusted by the idea. It's anyway. It just feels like crap. Alright, we got the inner race, got a little bit of greasy grease on that, and I'm not going to get grease on the rest of the outside of the wheel. We're talking a lot about grease, so we get it all set in there, in she goes. Grab my rag again so I can cover everything. Ugh. That's where you're wearing gloves and you're wiping stuff off it, but anyway. So again, same thing in reverse. Also, these seals have a direction. There's like a chamfered side on one. It's kind of hard to see, but one side the cut is square, and on this side the edges are kind of a little bit rolled. So I just put the edges are a little bit rolled towards the bearing, just so there's no sharp edges to cut against something. Then we take a felt seal. Again, we grab this, and it's got again the chamfered side on one side. Pop that in, take our spacer, fill in the rest. Dexterity at a premium with gloves on. Again, we grab our circlip. Don't get poked in the eye. There we go, perfect. And grab a little screwdriver here, just make sure everything is seated in properly. Perfect. And again, just because I'm all greasy doesn't mean that I can't make the wheel look nice. Clean it up, make it look pretty, get rid of all my crappy finger marks, off all the rubber. There we go. One wheel ready to go onto an aircraft, which is the red one just behind me there. All done. I'll go slap these on the aircraft. Putting them on the aircraft's a little bit easy. I'll show you how I've got the aircraft jacked up actually, because it's a little bit hard with this plane to actually get it off the ground, so I'm actually picking it up off the engine. So we'll go show you that and put the wheels on it, and hopefully this will be a pretty cool in-flight entertainment. I know it's just wheels, but I mean, I know it's just a wheel, but anyway, it's interesting to look at, I guess. And if it wasn't interesting for you, well, oh well. Oh well. Alright guys, I'll talk to you again soon.